Hello, my name is Henry Keane. This is News Pulse at UATV. Welcome to the weekly show. Today in the episode, Putin's economy is falling apart both after Ukrainian strikes and European sanctions. Orban's hysteria is on the new peak, really. Now Polish Prime Minister is under his attack. Ukraine is going to play a larger role in global security systems. New formats are already emerging. At least 20% of Russia's total export capacity is out of order, states Reuters. Russia's major Baltic Ust-Luga port suspended oil exports a week ago after heavy drone strikes and following heavy fires. And while Ukrainian drones target both export infrastructure and domestic refineries, Russian oil pipeline system is just choking with oil in storage. That means some oil fields will have to reduce their output to avoid further flooding the overloading system. Maybe the reason of the overload is the March 2026 Ukrainian Defense Forces campaign that has become one of the most extensive in the terms of the number of strategic Russian enterprises targeted. Strikes hit 5 major factories and 10 Russian oil refining facilities. Amongst them was the Kremlin plant in Bryansk, one of Russia's largest microelectronic manufacturers. Additionally, the only technical maintenance center for S-400 air defense systems in Crimea was targeted, as was the Alchevsk metallurgical plant where artillery shell casings are cast. And also one of the largest Russian petrochemical enterprises is ablaze and burning in Nizhny-Kamsk. And no, it was Ukraine. There were no drone assaults, no raid alert triggered, nothing. So what happened? Russia happened, actually. The systemic overload of it. Such yourself, this plant is Nizhny-Kamsk that you watch burning now was not even able to properly service maintain its technical machinery, as these are exclusively Western machinery after all. Russia just doesn't produce such on its own. Now add to it all the international sanctions, making it increasingly difficult for Russian plant to acquire any spare parts for that Western machinery. Add to it that the plant can't shut down and repair its continuous cycle system, and raw material deliveries are to continue the cycle aren't being met. Also, not even close. Now that's already thanks to Ukrainian drones flying all over Russia, and it's getting worse. And on top of all that mayhem, the Russian Tsar, who has always been oblivious to any kind of objective reality when it comes to his imperial ambitions, demands a 50% increase in missile production. That means 50% plus to what was already overloading the plant system, and voila! A predictable grand finale with no single Ukrainian drone involved. Russian military infrastructure commits what could be from now on called a technical suicide. A gas mixture had exploded following a sudden loss of pressure. The line that was producing synthetic rubber and plastics for Russian missiles. What a metaphor for Russian economy that indeed is losing pressure and is most literally falling apart with no spare parts, no money, no time, and great lack of professionals, many of them being Westerners actually working in Russia back in the day. Today, Putin prefers to throw all available resources left into the fire of his beloved war. Well, good luck in killing Russia, Vlad. Another Russian fighter jet, Su-30, crashed in temporarily occupied Crimea. This is the third such accident this week. During previous crash, it was a An-26 military aircraft, and then Russian Lieutenant General Alexander Troshenko, commander of the Northern Fleet's Mixed Aviation Corps, was killed there. And in 2014, this general personally participated in the Russian occupation of Crimea, and he had recently returned to the peninsula to address the critical air defense issues caused by the Ukrainian Defense Forces' systemic destruction of Russian military assets in general and air defense in particular. Russian Ministry of Defense stated that the crash of the plane was caused by technical malfunction. Well, it really is. Moreover, it is not just a lack of spare parts. It is a technical malfunction, really, of the Kremlin-built system being systematically degraded by Ukraine. And one more story alike for your attention. A passenger train has derailed in Russian Ulyanovsk. 7 cars of a train traveling from Chelyabinsk to Moscow just overturned. A total of 415 passengers were on board at the time of the incident, and during it the cars flipped onto their sides, forcing passengers to climb out through the windows to escape. Local authorities report 22 people injured, including a child. And again, there is no link whatsoever to Ukraine. It's just Russia being Russia. More than a third of all Russian companies are generating losses, as per Russian statistics coming from Rosdata. Significant problems have been recorded in the coal, oil, gas, automotive sectors, you name it. The federal budget currently lacks the funds to continue the war against Ukraine. It is so serious this time that the Tsar himself has reacted. Putin has turned to oligarchs for money. Meanwhile, Russian citizens are being asked to work 12-hour days, 6 days a week, with salaries delayed. Well, this initiative was proposed by Russian oligarchs, of course, Russian billionaire Oleg Deripaska. Putin's press secretary Dmitry Peskov stated that he sees nothing wrong in this idea. More in the following story.
94% of Russia's food service businesses are operating on the edge of profitability or at a loss. That is according to a survey by Action Buchhalteria, which included more than 500 companies across Russia. Nearly a third of respondents, 31%, reported losses. Another 36% said profits were low, while 26% described their businesses as financially unstable.
Let's start with Volgograd. Since January 1st, 8 restaurants have shut down, according to media reports, and that is just in one district, the city center. Yesterday, I drove past a place that had opened 2 months before we did. It is already closed, even though they made a lot of noise around their launch and tried to establish themselves on the market. I checked Avito. That's it. It is up for sale. In Moscow, 45 restaurants have shut down since January 1st. And it is not just individual businesses. Chain operators are closing too.
Major companies are also facing serious difficulties. According to the Moscow Times, supermarket chain Magnet, which operates more than 32,000 stores across 72 regions of the Russian Federation, ended 2025 with a loss of 22.5 billion rubles. It is the company's first negative financial result in more than 20 years of operation. The main reason is said to be its debt burden. Because of the high key interest rate, the company's loan servicing costs rose by 74% to nearly 164 billion rubles a year. Falling profits are being reported by virtually all businesses. Pressure on business inevitably hits consumers too, in the form of rising prices.
The cheapest butter is 154 rubles per 100 grams. A decent one like Vkusnotevo is already 300. That's what prices are like now.
And analysts say these are not isolated problems in individual industries. They are evidence of a systemic crisis in the Russian economy. For the first time, as many as 74 Russian regions finished the year with budget deficits. And there is nothing to compensate for them. Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service reported that Russia's gold reserves in 2026 fell to their lowest level in 4 years. The aggressor state's financial reserves are being depleted. Because of Russia's ongoing war against Ukraine, sanctions, and Ukrainian strikes on strategic facilities inside Russia, the Russian budget deficit in 2026 has already reached roughly $100 billion.
The cumulative deficit has already exceeded 15 trillion rubles. If you divide that by 80, you get the figure in dollars. And accordingly, this enormous deficit, which the government no longer knows how to cover, has led them to say that the only option is to cut spending. And in fact, back in February, even though the year had only just begun, the Russian government was already considering a so-called sequestration, that is, limiting budget expenditures.
The Russian government is considering different ways to deal with its financial troubles, but none of them promises anything good for ordinary citizens. For example, in the name of budget savings, Anatoly Artamonov, head of the Federation Council Committee on Budget and Financial Markets, suggested that officials in Kaluga region shut down nursing homes. And here is another, so to speak, highly promising initiative. Oligarch Oleg Deripaska suggested that Russians switch to a 6-day work week. But that is not all. In his view, the work schedule should also change. Instead of 8-hour shifts, people should work 12 hours a day, from 8 in the morning until 8 in the evening.
We do not have many resources. To be precise, we have only one, and it is tied to our national trait. In difficult times, we know how to come together and work more. And the sooner we move to this new schedule ourselves, from 8 to 8, including Saturdays, the sooner we will get through this transformation. Oleg Deripaska, founder of Russia's largest metallurgical holding company, Rusal, from the Moscow Times publication.
Meanwhile, the key sectors that once filled Russia's state coffers are continuing to crumble before our eyes. The ferrous metals industry, for example, has lost access to technology because of sanctions and the departure of foreign partners, and is being pushed back decades, according to Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service. Modernization across the sector has now been put on hold. Banks are refraining from financing projects amid instability, while companies are trying to preserve liquidity for fear of further shocks. Reported by Nikita Skoblikov, UATV News.
And all Kremlin can do to show its so-called power is to attack civilian infrastructure. During the last massive Russian attack, which started yesterday and lasted almost 20 hours, air defense forces of Ukraine destroyed 26 missiles and 515 enemy drones. In total, Russia launched 579 targets. As Zelensky says, judging by the documents received from the intelligence, next few months Russians will strike logistics, railways and water supply. What a populist does for a living, blaming others. What a populist does for survival when he feels that not only he's losing grip of his 16 years long power over Hungary, but also a personal accountability is now looming on the horizon. Orban started with hysteria as usual, addressing Donald Tusk of Poland, this time quoting Orban, "Europe is approaching one of the most serious economic crises in its history. The world is facing a serious energy crisis. Europe is in great danger. The only way out is to lift the sanctions imposed on Russian energy immediately. We should think not about Putin, but about our country and our people instead of inciting war. Love and save your country, Donald." The Polish Prime Minister answered the call.
Orban, hand in hand with Putin, has long since abandoned Europe. We will not allow politicians who are looking at Budapest to condemn Poland to the same fate. From the post of Donald Tusk's party civic platform on X.
And then, somehow bypassing Kremlin's internet blocking, the follower of Orban's shows up online, Dmitriev of Russia.
Prime Minister Orban is one of the few voices of wisdom and reason in Europe. He understands the seriousness of the coming energy and economic crisis, and unlike the EU bureaucrats, knows what needs to be done to minimize the damage. Europe must listen to these few voices of reason. Kirill Dmitriev, Special Envoy of Russia on X.
Well, Orban, Dmitriev, Fico, Putin, doesn't matter. All populists act the same, not talking to you. They're telling you. And what they're telling you is an alarmist hysteria aimed to raise not an awareness, but right on contrary, fear. And the louder they are telling us, the better we can. Their time is running out. And that means something new must be rising. The former US Special Representative for Ukraine has criticized NATO, saying it needs something new, a replacement maybe even. He said the organization was acting cowardly during the American war with Iran.
Maybe we need a new NATO, a new defense structure. There are ways to do it. It's in the treaty. You could create an alliance with Japan, Australia, and those European countries that are ready to join the fight, like the new Germany or Poland, even Ukraine, which has also proven to be a good ally. Keith Kellogg, U.S. President Donald Trump's former special envoy to Ukraine.
Well, while Mr. Kellogg wants to reshape NATO, probably to better suit America in their next war of choice, Mr. Rubio feels certain about it. Slamming the door is the answer.
When we need them to allow us to use their military bases, their answer is no. Then why are we in NATO? You have to ask that question. Why do we have billions and billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, over the years, trillions of dollars, and all these American forces stationed in the region? If we can only use, in our time of need, we're not going to be allowed to use those bases. So I think there's no doubt, unfortunately, after this conflict is concluded, we are going to have to re-examine that relationship. We're going to have to re-examine the value of NATO and that alliance for our country. Ultimately, that's a decision for the president to make.
And this way or the other, Ukraine's going to be there to take part in any new defense structure that is going to emerge.
Ukraine is participating in all formats of engagement with our partners for more security and shared strength. We continue to work with countries that are currently under attack by the Iranian regime. New arrangements have been reached, and Ukraine will have an even greater presence in the new security formats. This will certainly strengthen Ukraine's export potential and defense capabilities.
A call to action on UATV. We ask you sincerely for a minute of your time to let us better navigate things. Please comment in the section below and let us know your opinion on the matter. The question sounds like that. Should NATO stay as is or change, and if so, in what way? We might bring a most popular and most brilliant answers of yours up in our next episode of News Pulse, so don't shy out. Tell us what you think. Well, it seems to be for today and for the 15th week of year 2026. I'm Henry Keane. We are UATV. Thank you so very much for your time and effort invested in Ukraine. We feel it, we need it, and we appreciate that a lot. Please comment, like, and subscribe to see what week holds for all of us, and globally and here locally. UATV will be there to keep you posted on all of that, as usual, in Ukrainian perspective. So please stay safe and tune for more. Goodbye.